Just a few technical reminding notes before we get started. If you experience any issues with your audio or video during the conference, just refresh your browser and that should take care of everything. If you have any questions for our speakers or panel members, please do feel free to post your questions on the video wall, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. We will share with our speaker at the end of the session, and they will reply to you through the video wall or through the email afterwards. If you'd like to connect with our speakers, please move to the home lobby page. You can find the speaker by typing their names under Networking tab on the right-hand corner of your screen. We welcome all of our audience to interact with each other through our networking features. And also, please feel free to tag us on our social media handles with the hashtag AIMDigital. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us to keep exploring SME hot topics and key solutions to the currently emerging issues. Now more than ever, teams are crucial for SMEs. How will SME entrepreneurs manage their resources? What step do SME entrepreneurs need to take? What are SME entrepreneurs' options as an employer, as an employee? How diversity and inclusiveness will serve well in a team? In our upcoming session, Engagement as a New Productivity in a Fast-Changing World, the SMEs HR experts will discuss how to build insight to boost team productivity and make the team more concrete and stronger. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the annual investment meeting organized by the Ministry of Economy. Our topic today for the AIM Digital Conference is Engagement as the New Productivity in a Fast-Changing World. Our focus is really on how do we help SMEs today in this context. The world as we know it has changed drastically over the last few months, so much so that we have an increasing level of uncertainty, ambiguity, and it's very difficult to be able to forecast what's going to happen next. So what does it mean for us as SMEs? That's the question. And we're going to debate this with an awesome panel present today. I'm going to introduce the panel members in a moment. Here we have the awesome panel in front of us. We have first Dawn Metcalf, who is based in Sri Lanka. We have Dr. Tamer, who is based in Dubai. We have Dr. Nairuz Pader, I suppose also based in Dubai. And we have Mr. Dragan, who is based out of in Europe at the moment, isn't it?
Geneva.
Geneva, thank you. So to start with, I'd like to get each panel member to introduce themselves and to share what is their perspective on the current context, what it means for SMEs in a fast-changing world at the moment. Over to you, Dawn. Start.
Okay, thank you so much, Manish. And just to say that whilst I am currently in Sri Lanka with this ridiculously beautiful background, I am normally based in Dubai. I'm grounded here during COVID. And I run an SME, so I run a small professional services firm out of Dubai. But I also work as an author. And one of the things that COVID did for me, one of the things that it has done to disrupt my life is that it stopped my fourth book being published and launched in June of this year. So, thanks COVID. I think for all of us, you're right, everything has changed. And what I'm noticing is that SMEs are going to have to be even more agile, even more nimble, even more capable of listening to their people and to the markets than ever before.
Thank you, Dawn. So what I sense is the need to be more agile and nimble for SMEs. So we're going to explore that more when we talk. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Tamer.
Yes, thank you very much, Manish. My name is Tamer. I'm a visiting professor at the RIT Dubai campus. My field of specialty is engagement, frankly. So I did my doctorate degree studying engagement and the role of engagement in productivity in organizations. My master's in change management, and I used to manage HR in a multinational organization across East Europe, Middle East, and Africa. When I look at the change in COVID, the requirement for engagement has changed in the dynamics of engagement in terms of the mental setup of employees as well as consumers. COVID came as a complete change in the status quo of the organizations and of life in general across the world. the readiness levels of people mentally was something that needs to be addressed. And now, as people are trying to recover somehow from the COVID, the engagement equation is changing again, and that adds up to the dimension of engagement and how vibrant the science is, and what kind of dimensions do we need to study and research, and also provide advice to organizations and to individuals in the society. So I look forward for the discussions today.
Thank you, Dr. Tamer. So we'll look forward to your experience both from a practitioner and the academic side of things. Thank you. Now I'll pass on to Dr. Nairuz.
Hi, nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Nairuz Badr, Syrian origin, Canadian nationality, global citizen, lived all over the globe. And I've been living in Dubai for over 40 years now. I'm a pharmacist by profession, but a couple of decades ago, I got accidentally introduced to leadership. And I always say I found people much more interesting than molecule. So I allocated the chemistry to work with people rather than being in the lab. At our company, we've been focusing also, we represent an SME. We're the first Arab female-led company in the MENA region in our part on sector. I've been the first also Arab Middle Eastern on several global board, including the Association of Executive Search. The reason why I'm mentioning this, because this has taught me the value of diversity and inclusion from all aspects. And, you know, I guess our panel today is a very good representation of this value. With the pandemic, with the challenges, extreme challenges that we all have faced, it comes with it great opportunities. So what we have found, it's of course a huge importance on focusing on digitalization, but equally, if not more important, the extreme, if you will, value that needs to be put on the human touch. And this is where I think we're touching here today. So this hasn't been more important than today in terms of equally investing on the human touch, on being genuine, in really being standing behind your employee and make them feel that we are here for you.
Thank you, Dr. Nairuz. So what I retain mainly is, what I found interesting is how do we put the human chemistry into things, how you shift from molecules to humans, and also how do you, in all these changes, how do we stay human with the people touch? Thank you. So we'll explore that definitely. And the last panel member is Dragan Radic, who is from the International Labour Office, and he's based in Geneva. Over to you, Dragan.
So thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Yes, so my name is Dragan Radic. I'm the head of the SME unit, small and medium-sized enterprises at the International Labour Organization. My background is in business management and psychology. The ILO is 100 years old, more than 100 years old, specialized UN agency, and we are known for a decent work agenda. So we are custodian of the SDG number 8, which is decent work and economic growth. And with that, we promote international labor standards, employment policies, social dialogue, social protection, and so on. And this topic it's of great importance really to the ILO, because it strikes at the heart of decent work agenda. And why is that? It is because it is people, right? Not machines, not the IPs, not processes. The people, we believe, are the greatest assets for any business. And since 1944, actually, in the Declaration of Philadelphia, the ILO stated, you know, that labor is not a commodity. So you have to treat workers with dignity, with respect as a human beings. And this is why one way of doing that is really employee engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dragan. So SDG number 8, decent work. And as we know, SMEs are globally amongst the biggest employers in the world. So most people are employed by SMEs, and it's becoming even more relevant to put engagement at the heart of businesses and SMEs. Thank you. As you see, ladies and gentlemen, we have an awesome panel. By the way, I didn't introduce myself yet, so let me introduce myself now. I have the pleasure to be your moderator for this session. My name is Manish Bandan. I'm based in the tropical island of Mauritius. I'm a fourth generation Indian. I happen to speak English with a French accent. And that's why you can see my accent is a bit peculiar. So I'll try to moderate my accent a bit. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. And as you can see, we have an awesome panel, which is a very diverse panel, which really represents the true global nature of global citizens that we are living in the world of today. So thank you. Let's move on to the first question as we dive into the subject. The first question, dear panelists, is why is employee engagement essential in today's VUCA world? I repeat, why is employee engagement essential in today's VUCA world? So who would like to go first? Who would like to take a deep dive on this? Dawn. I see Dawn raising her hand. Please shoot, Dawn.
I want to get in here first because I have not done my PhD in employee engagement. So I want to make sure that I'm thinking about employee engagement in the same way that everybody else is. So as I understand it, and please do jump in, Tamer, and tell me if I'm wrong. But as I understand it, employee engagement is about making sure that we've got the right conditions in place so that everybody can bring themselves, their best selves, to the workplace every day in order to feel and feel motivated, capable, obliged, supported to work towards achieving the team, the organizational goal. Tamer, is that a reasonable explanation of employee engagement? Okay, so if that's the case, then it seems to me to be obvious that in any situation, but particularly in this situation, we need employee engagement. We need everybody to bring their best selves. When everything is changing this much, then we need to hear from the front line. We need them to feel empowered to speak up. We need the senior leaders, the middle leaders to shut up and listen up so that they can learn. Where I think we go wrong with the employee engagement way too often, and again, I'm a practitioner, not an academic, so forgive me if I'm simplifying, but too often it becomes about happiness and well-being. And happiness and well-being are important, but they are not enough. Putting in beanbags, putting in foosball tables, and telling people that they can go on flexi time is not employee engagement. It is slightly better than your CEO standing up and giving out some nonsense video for 2.5 minutes and then going, halas, good, they're all engaged now, we're done. But it's not much better than that. If it's about everybody being able to bring their best selves to work, then it's about everybody speaking up and the grown-ups listening up, working with their people to find out what the obstacles are, what the challenges are, and how they can get rid of them. I may be done for the whole of the podcast now. This is mostly what I wanted to say.
Let me, no, actually, you set up the pace. It's, you clicked on all the right words. And I think the point, when I started researching what really engagement is, I interviewed David McLeod, who is the, along with Nita Clark, they issued the first report to the British government on what engagement is, because that was an issue, and the UK government wanted to, they saw the spending and the focus on employee engagement, so they hired David McLeod and Nita Clark to actually define what engagement is and write a report to the British government. So I was doing my research in my doctorate degree at that time, and I interviewed them as a reference, and I told them, so how do you define engagement? And David McLeod told me, you know, I stopped counting when I reached 56 different definitions of engagement. And I still remember that discussion. In every culture, in every context, there is a different definition of engagement. And that made us, you know, look into what is really engagement. And we found 4 dimensions of engagement, what defines engagement. So, and we called that model the 4H model: head, heart, hand, and hope. So head is the rational engagement, which is, you know, I trade in my time for an organization and for a society. What do I get back? Which relates to the code that Mr. Radic was coming into. So I'm trading my life. I'm giving you my life, and that's not something that I can replace. So what do you give me in return? And that's the rational part.
Well, let's hope it's just time and not an actual life, because that seems like a lot to be asking for at work. Just time, maybe.
Yes, life is all about, you know, moments that we live. And you know, the second H was the heart, which is the emotional engagement. So which relates to the affection and how the absorption of time, how am I enjoying myself? The third is the hand, which is the physical, which relates to the job demand and resources. Do I have the right resources to do my work, or I'm being burned out, asking me for that kind of demand, but I only have that level of resources, so I'm burning out myself. And the fourth one is the hope, which is the vision for the future. Do I look long term? Does my work today help me achieve a long-term vision that we want? So actually what you mentioned, Dawn, is exactly, sometimes people would focus on a certain dimension of engagement, which is the emotional side, but that's not the total engagement, because you still have the rational and the physical and the hope. So that's how it is. So yes, you clicked, actually, you actually clicked all the buttons on that.
Can I just come in quickly? I think that obviously, since we are here, we would all agree that, and the research shows, employees engagement is very important. It brings results. There's lots of good research to show that. And I can tell you from our side, we have a global program running now in 26 countries, which is called SCORE. And that SCORE program is about improving productivity and working conditions based exactly on employee engagement and workplace cooperation. So from my experience, we know that it is not easily done, and we can talk about it later, but when it's done properly, it does bring a great results to SMEs and to their workers as well. But it has to be done properly. So I fully agree with Dawn. I mean, you don't do it by saying, okay, I've heard about it, so let's have Friday night drinks, you know, and let's kick off, and then it's all done and we forget in 2 weeks that and you know, it's new flavor of the month. So if you're going to do it properly, it has to become a business priority, and it has to be driven by a top. And we'll be talking about that later, how. But for me, the key words are this, you know, trying to achieve the emotional attachment so that workers feel passionate about it. So it's passion, it's emotional attachment, it is a trust between the management and the workers. And then you create this profound connection that is lasting, you know, so it's not only about money, right? It has to be more than that. I'll stop there to give opportunity to other colleagues.
So I'd like to react on that to see, because the question was, why is it important in today's world? So we discussed a bit briefly about what engagement is. We demystified it to give it some context and meaning, including, very interestingly, thank you, Dr. Tamer, about the 4H formula. So the question here is, why is it important in today's context? Could we explore that?
Well, because it's about productivity. Because if the definition is we need employee engagement so that people can bring their best to work and get on and do what we're paying them to do, then what else is there if there's not that? I'm struggling a little bit. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a CEO of a bank in the Middle East, and I was talking to him about L&D and learning and development for his people. And this was not in a business meeting, this was casually, socially, because that's how much fun I am to talk to in social situations. And he said, oh yeah, no, I'm not interested in that. And I said, well, why not? And he said, oh, I'm interested in the numbers. And I was immediately frustrated, because where does he think the numbers come from? If the numbers don't come from your people, then where do they come from? So you focus on the input, my friend, not the output. The output is engagement. What are the inputs? That's what we're interested in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Nairuz, please.
I was going to say, and more so, this is very vivid in an SME environment, because everything, you have a lens that expanded drastically. And as accurately has been said, you know, if you will, the employee retention or lack of it, it has a massive cost, especially on SME and SME business owners. Retaining top talent is definitely a priority, and it cuts spending and it creates a high value for the organization. So definitely, I mean, putting a great emphasis, I would say, on employee engagement, but with a differentiative approach and understanding that one size does not fit all. What could be very survival for me today could be trivial for somebody else. So like Dawn said, let's all of us to go out for a drink. That could be a burden on me when I'm having my kids that I need to attend to and do homeschooling, for example. So I think to allow the voice of the employee and listen to their unique if you will, needs, that's in a way the simplest way. But once this is done correctly, it has a great impact. And there are so many research, and I'm sure Radek has a lot of them to prove the impact on P&L and bottom line once the engagement is done properly.
Can I just to pick up on that point? Dawn, it is about productivity, but if it is going to last and be sustained, it has to be more than that. It has to be productivity and working conditions. You know, this is the same, the two sides of the same coin, because the management has to lead, has to start, but the workers will be on board for the time being, but then you have to really share the gains. I mean, this is about expanding the pie, right? Enlarging the pie. And then when you do that, if you only take and do not give, the pie will not last long. You know, it's going to shrink again. And that's why this is very, very tricky, especially in the SME arena, you know, how you share the gains. This is really tricky, Victor, and we can talk about it later.
That's exactly the point. That you can't, sorry, Tamer, but that's exactly the point. You can't do engagement to somebody else, right? You can't stand up and go, hello, I am the CEO. I'm engaging you now. That's just not how it works. People decide whether or not they're going to be engaged and how long they're going to be engaged for. And to Nairuz's point, it is individual. People want different things. We can't be all things to all people. I don't care less about some things that other people really, really care about. I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier on who said the only thing he cares about is being able to spend more time with his kid, being able to drop his kid off at school and pick her up at work. That's what he cares about. If he was able to work for somebody who saw that, he'd be a lot more engaged. Would it be everything? No, of course not. Because as you were saying, Dr. Tamer, the 4 H's, and possibly even more, right? Who knows? But certainly one thing on its own is not going to be enough if it's going to be sustainable. I hear you very, very clearly on that, Dragan. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, what I wanted to add here is sometimes, you know, when not only on SMEs, let's go back and let's go up a little bit, like 2-3 levels. If we look at the economic performance of any country, there are 3 enablers. You know, there is the economic capital, how much cash do they have? There is the social capital, and there is the human capital. And when we look at engagement, I really like what Mr. Radic has mentioned, because it's not a luxury, because the human, let's think of the economic movement. It's all based, economy is based on supply and demand. If there is a goodwill in the customers, they are going to, disposable income is going to improve because they will be willing to spend and go out. And that relates to the mental healthiness of people. And if there is, also the employees are part of that social capital because they are able to build business. Social capital is defined as being able to build networks and to use these networks in building business and relationships and all of that. So when we think of engagement, it's much bigger than the only the performance of an organization. It's all about the community. It's the social well-being. We are spending times, and I'm sure the ILO guidelines, and when we looked at that, it's affecting the mental health of the community. And the mental health is part of the public health policy, which is one of the major concerns of governments across the world. If my people, well, my working capital is healthy, let's look at the American Psychological Association latest guidelines. Number 1 disability factor in the labor factor is depression and mental health. So it's the number 1 disability factor. If we think of how much engagement can bring into the mental health and decrease that, it's a disability factor. You can see that there is a productive population unable to work because of the mental readiness. So that if leaders, now I go back to what Dawn mentioned, it's not an option. If leaders are able to really absorb that and push it forward as a very strategic initiative, not something that will only short-term bring me dollars, but long-term affect consumers' level of economic performance across the organization and across the whole country, that's a dimension I hope that we can reach with that level of thinking.
I would like to add 2 dimensions here, if possible. First is there's a nice resource shared by Marcus, by Dr. Goldsmith. What's the name again? Marshall Goldsmith, on what he believes is engagement. And he quotes engagement as it's a 2-way traffic. It's an equation where you have on one side what's the employees doing to get engaged, and on the other side, what is the employer doing to be able to create engagement. It has to work both ways. Unfortunately, most of the time, companies, enterprises, even SMEs think of it as one way only. That is, what do I have to provide to enable engagement in my workforce? But at the end of the day, it's also what each individual, as Dawn mentioned, has to do to be engaged themselves. So I think that's one dimension which is worth putting forward.
It's like this conversation. It's a conversation we've had 100 times about work-life balance. And people go, well, I want work-life balance. Well, how am I going to give you work-life balance? I don't know what that means to you. People have to take some responsibility for themselves. It is a two-way process. Having said that, if you do try and speak up, if you do try and get engaged in your workplace and your leadership are not engaging back, then they're telling you something and you've got to make some decisions, right?
You know what, I think also we need to, when we talk about SMEs, there is no standard definition of SMEs, right? So that's the first thing, but the focus here is on SMEs. And this is particularly challenging when it comes to employee engagement, because SMEs have poor HR practices in general. But that's, again, I'm generalizing, because what are we talking about here? Are we talking about Western Europe, where you have figured it out very quickly, and in a number of parts of the world, developed world, where you have figured out, employees are really key asset and I have to take care of them and I have to be flexible if I can? Or are we talking about developing world where there is huge power distance between a manager and a worker, and where people have to first learn to actually appreciate that the workers are actually genuine human capital, right? They're not commodity. And I think when we're talking about SMEs, when we're talking about, bringing them on board, childcare, flexible working arrangements, we're talking about two different worlds. There are two gears in this world, and we have to be mindful of that. There's lots of catch up to be done in a number of countries.
I've spent most of my career working in countries where there is a high PDI, power distance index. So just to be clear to anybody who's watching, what that means, that's a situation where people feel comfortable with a hierarchy in essence. So I'm okay knowing where I stand and where you stand, and nobody's going to try and move it very much. And you're right, that does have an absolute impact on the way people treat their workers. But I would argue that if we're going to ask people to treat their employees like humans, we should call them humans. We shouldn't call them assets. We shouldn't call them human capital. We shouldn't do anything like that. We should call them people. But I would also argue because if you just give them an inch with human capital and they'll treat them like capital. But I would also argue very strongly that there's no point. There's no point making the argument, hey, they're people, be nice, be good. They deserve a decent workplace. You're never going to get that. We tried that, ladies, women, we tried that. Be nice. We're half the population, give us half the space. Nobody paid the slightest bit of attention. You have to do more than that. You have to make the actual business case. Now, and I'm sure it's been made, but I'm pretty sure it's like D&I. You've made it, the research is out there. If anybody can be bothered to read it, they know that case has been won. The question now is, what can we tell people to do specifically, and tell them what not to do? Because let's face it, we're all running businesses, right? And the people we're talking to, the running businesses, they are going to be like the bank CEO. They're going to be worried about the numbers. So if you want them to do anything else, it's got to be connected to those numbers. There's no, There's no mission without a margin, people.
I think we're branching into house, right?
Yeah.
The second question, you're jumping down, but that's good. We have to move on, no?
Yes, indeed. I think in a nutshell, what I would summarize from the essence of what we've covered on this first question is how do the importance of engagement for SMEs and for enterprises doesn't have to be proven. There's a strong correlation between productivity and performance. There's a strong correlation between happiness and engagement in that sense, how it creates that impact on society as well. And finally, how do you make it, the valence is, that is, how do you make it pertinent at an individual level? What matters for you might not matter for someone else. So how do we connect with that and make sure that by finding what matters for the person, we're able to create effective engagement on that? Good. So let's move on to the second question now. Thank you, Lulu. The second question is, how can SMEs enhance engagement in their teams? Okay, so how can SMEs enhance engagement in their teams? So who would like to go first?
I would.
Yes.
And I will touch here on a recent McKinsey research that have been done in terms of what is the rescue remedy for organizations and SMEs in the current pandemic. And the first thing that has been identified is reskill program. Nowadays, we need to invest into unskilling what we knew, what used to be really good for yesterday is irrelevant for today, and then reinvest again into the learning of new skills. One of the main elements as well is to be very careful not to cut cost of learning. And learning doesn't have to be a huge budget. It's on the how. There are so many ways that you can do different, if you will, platforms in terms of learning, especially having the luxury of being an SME. The managers can have more time on one-on-one contact. There is like on the job, if you will, mentorship and coaching. It doesn't have to be a big workshop, maybe a 5 to 10 minutes interaction. You can do a bit of small dose of learning, and then they go back and come, if you will, and share their stories and what they have learned. And building employee skills is very critical in terms of what is the new business model and what's relevant for today and tomorrow, which is totally different to what we have known in the past. Of course, to also be able to be agile and to be able to start quickly on whatever programs that you have identified, test it rapidly and interact, ensure that it's integrated in your system. And in general, SMEs, even though that many may not have identified the employee engagement definition, but many of them, the good news that they have been doing it, because simply, by not having the hierarchy that Radik was mentioning, for example, and by more working as a family business. So it tends to be that there is this kind of unity and care that works within SME, and less, if you will, bureaucracy when it comes to that. And of course, that's the big notion, but our people are applying it. The ones that they're having excellent, if you will, impact on organization, on economy, on society.
I just adding to that, I think we have to start with the question why. When it comes to employee engagement, why should we worry about that? I'm running small business, for example. I'm struggling, on daily basis, lots of problems. And somebody comes up, okay, this is now the greatest idea or new idea, employee engagement. Why should I worry? I mean, I think it's a business case, and Ron said about this, right? I think you have to show to owner of the small business that there is clear business sense beyond common sense, that actually engaging employees is good for the business in order to change the mindset of the leader, right? So I'm not always in favor of starting from the top, but in this case, when it comes to employee engagement, I would argue you need to go at the top. You need to present the business case. You need to show the data. From our programs, we can show percentage-wise how much you save on energy, how much less you waste, how much you cut the cost, how little accidents you would see. It would, you show the numbers, you show the figures, and then you actually get attention. And this is then why. And then later on we can talk how. And I just don't take the time.
Yeah, and I can share personal
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Lois. Sorry.
You go ahead.
Please.
I was going to say, I'm going to share a quick small example, a live example in our organization. When pandemic hit, cash flow was a big problem. So we had a meeting and I was very honest with the team. And I said, guys, we do have a problem. So help me to find solutions. What can we do so that we can survive? And they came up with a solution that let's stay working out of home and let's save on energy, running cost, operational cost from the office. And that enabled us to survive according to their priorities and how they were part of the problem solving. So, getting everybody on the table and engaging them, empowering them, they start to operate as business owners, and they will think, what can I do that will benefit the business so I can survive? And that was really a very simple exercise, but it really helped us to survive in a very, very tough environment, being a very SME in this part.
It's a great point, Nairouz, and absolutely underlines what I was going to say, which is as a business owner, and negates what I said earlier, which it should be about a business case. But as a business owner, if you can meet the person that is genuinely engaged with your business, it's just so much more fun, right? It's just more fun working with those people. So I'm lucky enough to have a colleague who I describe as the best decision I ever made. And when we go into meetings together, we're never trying to sell employee engagement. But I bet if we did, it would work because of how engaged she is. She is, she's obviously a joy. Anybody she's ever met wants to steal her from me. Do not steal her from me. Walk away. The other thing that you said, Nairouz, is that it's kind of simple. And this is the problem. People want it to be complicated. And things can be really, really hard without being complicated. And this is hard without being complicated. So I've got a story about a guy years back in Dubai, and he was a sales manager, international, big multinational insurance company. And he moved to Dubai, and he had the most multicultural, most diverse team he'd ever had in his whole life. And this team, within 8 months, their sales had gone through the roof. Like they were knocking it out of the park. So HR people from the company from all over the world came to visit going, what did you do? What did you do? What did you do? As you might imagine. And he went, well, here's the story. I was born in the north of England, and I worked in the north of England my whole life. And because I worked in the north of England, I knew everybody and I knew how they thought, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew how to manage them. I knew how to engage them. I turned up in Dubai and I had a South African, a Mauritian, Lebanese, a Syrian, an Irish, an Australian, men, women, Muslims, Christians, all kinds of people. I had no idea what to do with these people, no idea how to engage them. So do you know what I did? I asked them. And then when they told me, I did that thing. And guess what? HR were really annoyed because it wasn't complicated. It wasn't a platform. It wasn't a system. It was as simple and as hard as ask your people, shut up and listen.
I would, as a confirmation to what has mentioned, and also a debate point, I don't think there is a silver bullet for what's the question that Manish has raised in the beginning, which what do SMEs need to do in order to raise engagement and to. I don't think there is a silver bullet, and I echo what the discussions were saying. It's all about understanding the employees, and that's what we all need to focus on. You have a unique mix of employees. Most of the world now, with the immigration statistics and all of that, you have people from different backgrounds, different cultures, sit with them, ask them, listen to them, exactly like you mentioned, and analyze. And based on that, act. I don't think there is a formula that we need to, so to the question back that was raised, I don't think there is one thing we can do. We cannot say, focus on doing 1, 2, 3, maybe listening to people, analyzing and understanding what engagement means in your context, and then based on that, making an action that makes sense. And sometimes we say, common sense is not common. And that's why if we are, let's say, 4 or 5 people engaged into organizations, what works in an organization is a necessary not going to work in another organization. So, and I think this is what is missing in many organizations, that sometimes they need, and this is what I see as a practice in the majority of organizations, they would go and buy off-the-shelf engagement surveys, just try to do them, whatever is happening, then they apply. That doesn't work. Because again, if we look at the global workforce study that was done twice in 2010 and 2012, the engagement drivers that were found in 2010 were completely different than 2012 in terms of the drivers and the priorities themselves. When they compared the top 5 priorities that occurred in USA was different than Mexico, then different than China. So every country, every culture, every organization has its own priorities. So what you need to do, in my own opinion, there is no silver bullet to answer the question. I think so, from my own opinion, there needs to be a step before planning, which is diagnosis. Like, whenever there is an issue, diagnose first and then plan. So, in my part of answering that question would be, spend some time in diagnosing what is exactly the engagement equation, and then based on that, make an action.
Okay, just because the question is how, just from my experience from the ILO, I mean, based on 10 years and work in 26 countries, you know, and thousands of SMEs, I agree that there is no silver bullet, but there are some checkpoints that helps in employee engagement. For example, one being that the workers should understand the big picture deal, right? What this organization is all about, where is it going, how do they contribute? I think that's starting point to actually, willingness to be engaged. Then ideally, you know, knowing your employees personally is great. You guys running smaller businesses, it's easier, but when you run a medium-sized business, 300, 400 workforce, it's a bit tricky. And therefore you need to have you need to somehow feel the temperature of the room. You know, what are the workers thinking? Are they happy? Is the particular supervisor really bad or aggressive that is demoralizing the workforce? This is that research that you're talking about. You have to do your homework to understand. And then once this is done, it comes the open and honest communications between managers and workers, and leading by example. If you say, well, I want to engage, I want to hear you, then when they give you the idea, you know, how you could improve the business, and this could be done either through some employee suggestion schemes or performance improvement committees, it's important that you act on it and you say, okay, we consider it, you know, it didn't work, but you give this feedback. Otherwise, you have lots of ideas being generated, but nobody's catching these ideas. And if nobody is responding, it is really it's not going to work. So that's from the enterprise perspective, you know, from the management perspective. Regular meetings, bullet points, bullet board, newsletter, tell them what's going on. But then again, what's in it for them? This is super important. It cannot last. So really, what's in it for them? It's, you know, you reward people. You know, if this idea is saving you an energy or it's really making you more productive, then you actually put them on a pedestal as a champion, and you reward them. You actually invest in employee training, and you survey the workers regularly to feel that temperature. I mean, these are some. I mean, we don't have time, but we could talk a lot. These are some of the things concretely that we know. They're working at the shop floor in the furniture factories in Vietnam, shoe manufacturing in Colombia, you know, in China, in high tech. Yeah, these are some of the tips.
I agree with you, Radhik, and you know,
Interesting you say that. Sorry.
No,
Sorry, go ahead, Tamar.
All right. So the point is all about doing the impact analysis. And this is exactly what Radhik was saying. There are elements. So always in engagement, there is element of leadership, element of vision and communication elements. And this is exactly why when we looked at the 4H model, we suggest and say that you have to do impact analysis first to see what is out of those. In every organization, there will be priorities and impact. Based on that, then you make an action. And we were able to do that in an organization of 4,500 employees. When the managers are accountable for doing the impact analysis in their departments, then they are able to make a plan forward. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. So I was just thinking it was interesting what Dragan said, which was, and it was the first person to say anything that was remotely on the negative. So when we're talking about employee engagement, we were going, oh, positive and listening and money and home and hearth and whatever. But you make a really good point, which is sometimes it's about taking away the toxic, taking away that toxic individual, taking away that toxic process, being prepared to make the difficult decision and go, no, we're not having this guy or this lady in the room. They're not good for us. They're bad. They are not necessarily bad people. They are bad for us right now, and they must go. And I don't see enough of those decisions being made. You know, the know something rule, which I won't say on this particular podcast.
What I wanted to add to Draga's point, I totally agree with what you said, and not only that, if this input hasn't been taken and something came out of it as an action plan, not only no engagement, but it becomes more actually destructive. And it has been proven, for example, running leadership assessment center, when we don't do it right with the right follow-up in terms of communication and action, people start to think you were going to fire them because you tested them and then nothing happened. And more so, I would say, is when you ask me about my opinion and I come full-hearted and tell you everything about it, and you ignore me, it's much worse than not asking me. Another question that I wanted to challenge, the big organizations and academia here. So for Tamer and Radek, I wanted to ask you guys, assuming I'm an SME and I don't have the luxury of the methodology, I don't have time to run an assessment, and I don't have the resources now. I need to live now, but at the same time, I want to engage. So what do I do?
Yeah,
that would be the next question. What are the challenges and what do you do?
How much time do we have?
So as we said, it's around 15 minutes per question. Let me wrap up this one. There are a lot of nuggets, a lot of valuable insight which have been shared. How I would wrap it up is this question of how do we enhance engagement? I would reply on it. What I sense is through 3 questions, basically. So you answer one question with 3 questions. Instead of that, there's no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet, as you mentioned, but there are 3 questions which we need to deepen on. First one is, what is our purpose as an organization? Why do we do what we do? What is the meaningful work? Why people are working with our organization, which would make it create that kind of environment where people want to work. So that's one question which all business leaders, SME leaders need to have clearly at the top of their minds. The second question then comes is, what is the type of culture, what is the type of environment, culture we want to have, which creates that unique feeling of attachment, of bonding, emotional connection as a unique tribe that we have, which makes us want to work together and to pull through thick and thin, whatever the context is. And the third element is about the impact analysis. What are the, as Dawn also mentioned, is listen, ask the right questions to understand what matters for the people. So what are the factors which will make a difference for our people? What is the impact on it? Just by asking the questions and getting the answers help us really focus and prioritize on what we need to do.
And can I add the 4th one? Can I be cheeky?
Yes, of course.
I think just to say, I mean, when whoever is designing this, whether it's a project manager, or whether it's the SME owner, we are humans, right? We think what's in it for me? What's in it for me? You have to think what's in it for them. When you're approaching this, you really have to think what's in it for them. So it has to be win-win. When you're designing, if you're starting from scratch or improving, it cannot be only what's in it for me, whoever you are. It doesn't work.
Well, if I would look at and Nairouz asked a very good question, the shortcuts on engagement are usually very symptomatic, and sometimes they will kick back. And they will take investments, efforts, expectations from people. So I would always prefer, like the approach of diagnosis and then, walk the process. It's an important investment, so let's have a process for that, but let's speed up the process, but let's do the process. In my own opinion, if an organization wants to look, engagement is a long-term, when we speak about organizational culture, when we speak about I know Dawn hates the word capital, but if we say, social capital or so if we say social well-being, social welfare, if we do that, so in order to change the words, it's something that doesn't happen overnight. And if we do it properly, it needs to be we need to have people with resilience, people with knowledge, with that attitude that Dawn was talking about, the energy and the engagement. Radek was talking about the process. ILO is an organization meant to regulate and, to say, those guys are the parameters, those are the processes that you should be measuring. And this is why we need regulatory bodies, we need energy, and we need structure. So to Nairouz's question, I think I would always go to the long term and proper process design, that it will be more sustainable, at least in the future, rather than the short term shortcuts.
But how organizations, sorry, go ahead.
So it's kind of what you sense is focus on the process, make it systemic so that it becomes a system on its own that can live on its own, and it's not people dependent completely.
Yes.
Yeah, but Nairouz, I'm not putting words into your mouth, but I'm guessing that you want to address the fact that as an SME, who's got the time or the energy or the resources, which brings us on to the next question. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that what you were thinking?
Very well done, Dun. Thank you.
Like, really? Another process? No way.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question.
No worries, it's okay.
So for the sake of time, we need to move on to the next question, which are, what are the challenges SMEs have to overcome to create an engaged workforce?
Lack of time, lack of money, lack of energy. I mean, all of those things, the same as everybody else, right? Except it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the challenges are. It's like saying, well, what's the challenges involved in, oh, I don't know, in hiring people? It's awful, right? It's boring and it takes forever and it's expensive. And you're probably going to get it wrong. But you still have to do it. Yeah. Even without the process, Tamer.
Oh, well,
you know,
I'll summarize that, Don. In one thing, do we believe in occupational science, occupational psychology as a science or not? And I've seen in the majority of organizations I've been to, the science is not there. It's engagement is an activity. It is something we want to do. We buy a survey, we measure, and then we do an action. It's a science. I mean, occupational psychology is part of applied psychology. It is taught everywhere in the world. There are experts in this matter. So I mean, it's a science. So this is frankly what I mean as the biggest. Of course, I agree with you. Time, money, and all what you mentioned. I agree with you totally. But
I agree with you. I mean, I do. I agree with you. I was doing some work with an organization around cultural change. And what you just said about it being an activity as opposed to an actual process was driving me completely crazy, because you could see them just throwing energy and money at this, and it's not sustainable. It's not going to work. So I get you. I'm also now taking that hat off and putting on the SME owner and going, who's got the time? Yes. There is always going to be that problem.
Can I just say, it's not, just briefly. I mean, usually when you ask SMEs, what is the number one challenge? It is money. Access to finance is number one problem. In this case, actually, I don't think it's the access to finance. It's not finance. I think in many countries that we've seen, it is actually the culture of the place, where it's usually top down. I know the best. You're there to do what I tell you to do. How are you going to have employees on board like that, right? And also, so it's in culture of the workplace, it's copied from the culture of the country, right? So if you have a country where this power distance is very, very strong, then sometimes it is applied to the workplaces. But the other thing is also, where you have foreign investors going to another country, they tend to bring their own cultural values, and they tend to run the businesses the way how they would run it at home. That is creating lots of problems. You would never have workers on board if you do not understand local people, right? So it is not only always about money. Yes, it is about time, surely, but it is really workplace culture that it's important. Top down never works.
I think also it's about the balance between the science and the practicality. So I totally agree about, the science and the investment in terms of having the right approach and process in place. But let me challenge you guys. How many organizations you know of that they got the most wonderful experts coming, giving them this wonderful boxed file that have been put on the shelf and nobody use it? Number two, this pandemic, you tell me which process you refer to be able to survive where nobody has any manual related to this. So for us, for example, coming from emerging markets, it's built in our DNA to be problem solver, to be fast, to be survival, to be agile. These are the things that you need. That there is no time sometimes for the theory. I'm not saying it's not important. It's super important, but sometimes for you to be able to survive, you need to be a little bit more agile and on your feet to some extent. And like I said, about the example that I've mentioned, that it wasn't really rocket science for us. We just had an open conversation and I said, guys, we have this problem. I want to support, but I don't know what to do. You help me. And we came up collectively with a solution. And there are so many studies that shows actually that SMEs do much better in employee engagement than bigger organization, believe it or not, with all the big resources and supports and financials. So I think, again, going back to the human nature and the genuine interest from the leadership team into really, we are, employees feel it when you are really practicing what you're saying in terms we are in this together. Now,
Good.
going into the practicality, yes, some of the challenges that we all have SMEs, for example, fewer developmental opportunities. In bigger organization, you can promise somebody a career path, and that could be very inspiring. In an SME, reality, we may not have the same. So how can we excite employees and add value to their life continuously? And it's more and more proven, especially, the new generation, that they're more interested in the add value for their own knowledge and know-how and expertise and experience than really incentives and monetizing. So there is a shift in terms of what really adds value. So SMEs, we do have such a challenge. So what do we do about it? There are other things that we can do. For example, burnout is another thing, because when you are in SME, you really operate as an entrepreneur. You can be the CEO and the janitor and everything in between. And it's so much demanding. So how do we do about it? And, simply again, about having an open conversation and expanding your flexibility to accommodate. So for example, I have a colleague who has 2 young daughters that she has to attend to, but she works wonderfully almost, after working hours. And that's fine, as long as within 24 hours, we get what we want, it's okay. And actually that motivates her. Somebody else, he works out of home alone and she gets so bored. So we need to work on some activities to engage her and makes her feel not staying alone. So yes, we do have challenges, but it's doable. I don't think it's a big challenge for SMEs in terms of applying engagement. It's very simple, guys.
I think it's it's always the balance of the belief of whether in the DNA of the leaders of an organization, whether they want to take a short-term approach or a long-term approach. Let me give you an example. Everybody in the world knows that smoking kills. It's even written on the boxes of tobacco. Yeah, but still people are smoking. Why is that? Because they don't believe in science. They just you have to hide here. So the point is, do I believe? Whenever there is always that debate, what is in my gene? Do I believe that there is a scientific approach, or do I not believe in science? The WHO, even the tobacco companies have written that on the cigarettes, smoking will kill you, but people still go take their money and then go and buy something saying, please give me something that will kill me in an indirect way. So the point what I want to...
Could the moderator jump in here? I feel like I'm being personally attacked.
Okay, so what I'm saying is this debate, I like it between, whenever we say there is a scientific approach, people say, yeah, but pragmatic approach. Scientific approach is pragmatic approach because there is something called applied science. I mean, there is something called applied psychology. Applied psychology is split into clinical psychology, forensic psychology, pediatric psychology, social psychology, clinical psychology. So when you look into an occupational, of course, so occupational psychology is part of applied psychology. It doesn't mean it's not pragmatic. It just says, when you have a heart problem, you go to a cardiac doctor. You don't go to someone. There are people still in this world that we are living with all the media and science who don't believe in doctor, and they start going to people who are treating with herbs, natural medicine, all of that. It's in the genes. They feel, even in cancer, they don't go to cancer therapy. They will go to homeopathic therapy and they will say, I don't believe in science. I will go to natural remedies. So again, it's in the gene. And my point here is that if we are talking, and if we are focusing on engagement as something that is so important, let's give it the right way of design and let's not take shortcuts. Nairouz mentioned correctly that we are a region that is known for quick actions and survival and all of that. How much of that is sustainable? How many brands have gone global from the region? How many organizations have franchised in the region? Where are the organizations that are franchising everywhere? We are bringing in franchise. Where are our franchises? What I want to debate and raise as a point, since we are in an investment thing, is that if we structure properly, it's more having more chance to be sustainable and it's scalable. Because when you want to scale up something, it needs to be based on a design process, and this is absolutely, this is what I feel, but it's a very logic debate that always happens whenever you say science or practice. they shouldn't be against each other. They should complete each other. That's my point of view.
What we hear is it's both are mutual to each other. They support each other. Actually, what I hear from you, Dr. Tamer, is how do we engage? How do we create this as a proper strategy and embed it in your strategy as an organization, rather than it's just a process or just a one-off project? It becomes a complete strategy which is sustainable.
Absolutely.
And it's not expensive. I don't think it's the finance. Again, just going back, sorry, Dawn, just very quickly. I just don't think it's expensive. You know, when you engage your employees, you know, it is about communications. It is also about sure, investment in training, yes, that could come at a cost, but also it retains the workforce then. It is about occupational health and safety. That cannot be counted as a cost. You don't want a worker to lose the arm and the leg, and then how are you going to engage them later on if you don't care? So it is not expensive. It requires goodwill and it's common business sense. You know, the question is, if it's so good, why everybody is not doing it? You know, what's going on? This should be the debate. Yes, why people are still smoking if smoking kills?
Again,
you know?
Moderator.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, stop
Let's
smoking.
not take the smoking example.
Okay. Smoking example, no good. We maybe have tobacco companies.
But it's very important that this has to be a live exercise. We cannot do it once and tick the box and then think that we have the most fabulous strategy, because tomorrow it may be totally irrelevant, especially in nowadays the speed that this globe is evolving into. It has to be a dynamic, it has to be an ongoing effort, it has to be a conversational, and that's why I'm saying do not complicate it, because it won't be sustainable. You cannot keep it dynamic if you have to make this big project about it. So yes, the marriage between the science and the practicality, this is very essential. I agree.
And I feel Dawn has something to say.
Yes, yes.
I want to say two things. So number one, Tamer, you must not turn on the news today. If people not following science is bothering you, do not open the news. Seriously, particularly in the States. Don't touch it. The second thing, I think maybe, Nairouz, you and I might share some common characteristics. I remember speaking to my ex-husband and saying to him, look, I really don't like processes. That's my problem. And I understand that and I get that. And he looked at me and he went, what do you mean you don't like processes? And I went, well, you know, I don't like following processes. And he went, yeah, no, what you mean is other people's processes. As long as you create the process, Dawn, you're very happy with it. Yeah, look at you all nodding your heads like this, right? And this is the problem.
But the problem, engagement, that's exactly the core of engagement. You know, you just answered absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's about finding your process, what makes you tick.
Absolutely.
So really, again, tuning out, listening, understanding with the proper diagnostic, and then providing that solution which makes sense to that person.
Absolutely.
We agree.
Okay. So we can move on to the last question as we wrap up. This session has been very interesting, engaging, and insightful. So let's move on to the last question, which is, and I'll reach out to each panel member here, is what is the one key advice you would give to an SME embarking on such a journey in the current context? So let me repeat, what is the one key advice that you would give to an SME embarking on such a journey of engagement in the current context?
You mean an SME leader?
Yes, as he goes about embarking on engagement. Okay, so I think Dr. Bade also asked that question. That is, what do I do? I want to embark on engagement. So what do I do? Where do I start? And what is the advice you would give?
I mean, I would, from the ILO perspective, as I open, I'm going to close the same. I mean, the key advice, labor is not commodity. You know, we are talking about humans. We are talking about people. If you want to talk about assets, then we would say it's a key asset for the business. And therefore, when it comes to employee engagement, you need to take it really seriously, as you do with other aspects of your business, such as marketing, finance, production, customer services, because these are important functions as much as employee engagement. So advice would be set it up as a business priority, walk the talk, lead by example, get people on board, experiment, pilot, and absolutely share these gains. I mean, you have to be fair. it has to be win-win. That's the summary.
Thank you, Dragan. So walk the talk, has to be win-win. Believe in it before you embark on it.
Share the gains, yeah.
Well, I thought we were only allowed to choose one thing. If we're allowed to choose three things, then I'm choosing three things too. And that is be curious, be authentic, and no, I'm choosing those two. Be curious and be authentic. It's exhausting to be anything other than authentic. Oh, be curious, be authentic, and almost by definition, therefore be vulnerable. If you can do those three things, then other people will speak up. You can then understand them. And then even without a process, you can crack on and try and engage with them. So engage with them, not engage them. Engage with them, because humans.
So be curious, be authentic, and be vulnerable. So in essence, in one thing is be human, though. That's what you mentioned.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, you're right. Yeah, good point. Sorry, I could have just done it as one.
Thank you, Dawn. Dr. Tamer?
I would, if I want to give one piece of advice, that would be, we always say humans are the most expensive assets in any organization. If you believe in that, then as you do a financial strategy and as you do a capital strategy and as you should do a human capital strategy or a human strategy. And if you want to do a human strategy, there is always a process to follow. And I know, that this is something that we have to live with. And there is always, you can speed up the process. You can re-engineer the process to remove unnecessary moves and things that are not practical for you at that time. But follow a process, follow a scientific approach. If you really believe in the first statement, then this should be a conclusion. If you believe that humans are the most expensive assets an organization have, then treat your most expensive assets as a strategic asset and spend the time, spend the efforts. And as Mr. Radic has mentioned, it's not expensive at all. It's just something that needs to be in the genes, in the DNA, that if this is my most important thing, then walk the talk and plan right for your most expensive assets in the organization.
So in a sense, walk the talk, follow the process.
Yes.
Develop a process and follow the process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Nairoz.
I can't agree more with all what have been said, of course, but to add a different flavor, being the diversity catalyst, studies have shown that more diversity and inclusion you have, by default, it increases employee engagement. So invest in diversity, not only gender, not only authenticity, not only age, not only background. You will be amazed when you have different colors on the table, how much innovation happen, how much problem solving happen, how much engagement happens.
Thank you. So create engagement by fostering and encouraging diversity. It is naturally a catalyst which will create great engagement. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's been an awesome session. We are almost done. It's almost 1 hour. The time flies, actually, isn't it? So I look forward to seeing the recording with all of you. We will be, and understand it's going to be shared. So looking forward to revisiting it. And thank you once again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Manish. And I hope we have 10 seconds for commercial. I'm going to put in a chat box the SCORE. We talked about SCORE program a lot. I mean, I mentioned this program, which is really walking the talk on employee engagement and workplace cooperation. And this is really working in practice. So I'm going to put the link on the side in the chat box, and then people might just follow it.
Great.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Radic. Thank you to the organizing committee. Thank you to Lulu for being the hostess for this annual investment meeting, and the AIM Digital. So looking forward to the next one. All the best. Thank you very much.
This was definitely a great interactive discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Manish Bandhan, Dr. Tamir F. Elava, Ms. Dawn Metcalfe, Dr. Nairoz Bader, and Mr. Dragan Radic. Dear attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to post your questions on the video wall. We will share with our speakers and they will reply to you directly or through email. If you'd like to connect with our speakers, please move to the home lobby page. You will find the speakers by typing their names under Networking tab on the right hand of your screen. We welcome our audience to interact with each other on our chat wall. Please also do not forget to tag us on our social media handles with the hashtag AIMDigital.